He's almost been in the national spotlight, it seems, since he took office. He has been Texas Senator for 12 years. 6 years ago was not an easy victory. The polls show this race is also tight. We are pleased in this edition of Spriester Sessions to be joined by Senator Ted Cruz. Senator.
Steve, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
We met 6 years ago at the Buckhorn Museum in San Antonio. You're running against Beto O'Rourke. Does this race have a different feel than that one did?
It has a very different feel. Look, Beto was a charismatic candidate. He was tireless. He was everywhere. And he became a viral sensation, particularly on the left. And so it was a dangerous race. The Democrats more than doubled Democrat turnout in 2018. Colin Allred is a very different candidate. He is running really the same campaign that Kamala Harris is. Both of them are pretty much hiding in Joe Biden's basement. You and I were talking a minute ago about how Colin already does very few media interviews, although you're actually unique. You've interviewed him twice.
Yeah.
I don't know of another reporter in the state that's done that. Most days he doesn't do events, and he's relying on really two things. He's relying on, number one, over $100 million of paid advertising. They're just flooding the state with ads. And number two, I think he counts on a lot of the media to push his message. But I got to say, I think the reason that Congressman Allred doesn't do a whole lot of events and interviews is the same reason Kamala Harris doesn't. They're both trying to run away from their record. And both of their records are very, very similar. Their records are hard left. Both of them have voted in favor of open borders over and over and over again. They voted against law enforcement repeatedly. They voted for higher taxes. They voted against Texas oil and gas and energy. That's not a great record to be running on in Texas, and it's a big part of the reason neither one of them like to talk about it.
Is money also a big difference? Yeah. Because you outraised Beto, if I remember, 6 years ago.
No. He outraised me 3-1.
Okay.
We were massively outspent in that rate. Because, look, he would do
It didn't seem like as bad as it is. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's as bad as subjective, of course, but it didn't seem like it's as big a difference as it is this time around.
So this race is even more money. So the Democrats will spend between $100 million and $150 million trying to beat me. And Chuck Schumer's been explicit this cycle. I'm his number one target. George Soros is flooding cash into the race. And so it's a lot more expensive race. I mean, at this point, San Antonio, every other ad is an attack ad telling you how terrible I am. And that's just, look, money is dangerous in politics. It's why, as you know, we're in the middle of a 53-stop bus tour. So we're in New Braunfels right now. We've been, just in the last 3 days, we went from Wichita Falls, we drove up to Amarillo, then to Lubbock, then to Abilene, then to Midland, then to Waco, then to College Station. Now we're here. We're going to head down to the Valley early next week, and we're just heading all around. It'll be 53 stops altogether. And listen, I think that's what campaigns are all about. And what I talk about at every one of these events is my record and Colin Allred's record, because I think that's what a race should be all about, is the respective records of the two candidates.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Is the message that you're giving different than it was 6 years ago?
Well, sure, in a sense, because it's a different time. So 6 years ago, Donald Trump was president. It was the first election 2 years after that. There were a lot of folks on the left that were just really angry with Trump. So it was a different time. We're now facing 4 years of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And frankly, their record has been terrible. You think about it on the presidential level. The classic question in any presidential race is, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And unless you happen to be a Mexican drug lord, and by the way, I've joked, if you are, you should vote for Kamala Harris. Like, if you're a Mexican drug lord, she has made you billions of dollars. She's been incredible for you. But for everyone else, if you're a working family in San Antonio, you've seen the cost of living skyrocket. You've seen an invasion at our southern border. You've seen crime. You've seen Venezuelan gangs taking over apartment buildings in San Antonio. I think a lot of Texans are ready to change the path we're on. And just about every Texan would say, yeah, life was a lot better when Trump was president, when we had a Republican Senate, a Republican House. We had prosperity, we had jobs, we had peace globally. And so I think this election is very much a referendum on Kamala Harris's disastrous record and Colin Allred's record, which is exactly the same.
And that's what I was going to ask you. What's the biggest difference between you and Colin Allred?
Look, it is night and day. My record for 12 years has been fighting every day for jobs, for freedom, and for security, and delivering real results. In 12 years, I've authored and passed 101 different pieces of legislation into law. Actually, one of the most recent, and we just got a huge victory for San Antonio this week, is the FAA reauthorization. I authored the language to give San Antonio a direct flight to and from Ronald Reagan National Airport in D.C. Now, as you know, Steve, San Antonio's been fighting for that literally for 20 years. And it was probably 3-4 years ago that a delegation from San Antonio came and met with me. And they asked me, they said, Ted, would you lead the fight to make this happen? I said, absolutely. And it was elected officials, most of whom were Democrats. It was business leaders who were very focused on it. And I am the ranking member on the Senate Committee of Commerce, Science, and Transportation. Commerce Committee has jurisdiction over about 40% of the U.S. economy. So if you care about jobs, and jobs are my number one priorities, there are very few, if any better places in Washington than helping lead the Commerce Committee. And on the FAA bill, the single biggest fight we had, I wrote the provision to give San Antonio that direct flight, and the Democrat senators from Virginia and Maryland, they fought tooth and nail. They delayed the bill for several days on the floor of the Senate. And at the end of the day, Texas prevailed. We won. The vote on the floor of the Senate was 88-4. The only no votes were the 4 senators opposed to the San Antonio flight, and we got it passed into law. And just this week, the Biden administration, Pete Buttigieg, Secretary of Transportation, called me and said, we've just approved the direct flight to and from San Antonio. So that's an example of my record, is fighting over and over again for jobs and getting real results for Texas. On the other hand, Colin Allred, he's voted his first 4 years in the House, he voted with Nancy Pelosi 100% of the time. So it's been hard left. He's voted for higher taxes, more spending, more debt. When it comes to oil and gas, look, South Texas, a lot of jobs in South Texas depend on oil and gas. A lot of the revenue for our school system, for our universities, depends on oil and gas. I've been the leading defender of oil and gas in the Senate for 12 years. Colin Allred has voted over and over and over again against oil and gas and Texas energy jobs.
But it's interesting because he is putting himself up as bipartisan.
He is.
You don't agree with that?
Not remotely. So his voting record, his first 4 years, he voted 100% with Nancy Pelosi. He didn't deviate. I don't think anyone on planet Earth thinks Nancy Pelosi is bipartisan. The first 2 years of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, Colin Allred voted with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris 100%. He is always, always, always voting left wing. I got to tell you also, his entire career in Congress, he's authored and passed 3 pieces of legislation into law. He's done very little, but what he does is just votes however the Democrats tell him to. And it was funny, we talked about this in the debate. He bases this bipartisan talking point on this nonprofit group that ranks members of Congress.
Right.
And he kept saying it, and I was confused by that. I'm like, wait a second, how do you vote with Nancy Pelosi 100% of the time and be called bipartisan? So I went and looked at their website. And this is a group whose board members are a bunch of Democrat donors. And they say on their website, oh, we don't examine how you vote. We don't look at votes. We don't care about how you vote, just your rhetoric. If you sound bipartisan, we'll say you're bipartisan. Listen, you want to talk about bipartisan. You don't pass 101 pieces of legislation without getting real bipartisan support. All right, let's talk about a couple of other bills that I've passed into law. I-27, the Ports to Plains corridor. That's going to run from Laredo, north through West Texas, through the Panhandle, through New Mexico, all the way up to Montana. I was the lead author of that legislation. I teamed up with Ben Ray Lujan, a Democrat from New Mexico. Cruz Lujan got overwhelming bipartisan support, passed into law. That's going to produce thousands of jobs throughout Texas. Another bill, I-27. It's another brand new interstate. It's going to run from the Permian Basin in West Texas through East Texas all the way to Georgia and the Atlantic Ocean. I teamed up with Raphael Warnock, one of the most liberal Democrat senators in the entire Senate. Cruz Warnock passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. That also is going to bring thousands of jobs to Texas. Let me point out one more that really matters to San Antonio and South Texas. I was the lead author of legislation to expedite the permitting for 4 brand new bridges from South Texas to Mexico across the Rio Grande. We got that passed, and just a few months ago, the permits were issued. Those bridges, again, are going to produce thousands of jobs in Texas.
Are you tired of hearing about Cancun?
You know, it is what it is. It's a funny thing. For Colin Allred and the Democrats, anytime that they're trying to defend their record, they're trying to defend, if Colin Allred is asked about his record voting for open borders over and over and over again, his response is he screams Cancun. If he's asked about voting to kill oil and gas jobs, his response is he screams Cancun. I don't know, maybe there's some left-wing Democrats for whom that's a persuasive argument. I am more than happy to put my record every day of fighting for Texans next to Colin Allred's record, and I don't think it's close in terms of the results we deliver.
All right, I appreciate your time. I'm going to get one last question
Yeah.
in. You're a lawyer.
Yeah.
This is the closing days. You're making your closing statement to people out there who are undecided in this race.
Yeah.
What do you tell them? What's one thing you say that the biggest difference to why they should vote for Ted Cruz?
Look, I'll give you 3 words. Keep Texas, Texas. That's the whole theme of our campaign. You know, we've had for more than a decade, over 1,000 people a day have moved to Texas. There are a lot of reasons they move, but the number one reason is Texas is where the jobs are. And they're fleeing from blue states like California, New York, New Jersey, Illinois. Colin Allred is campaigning as a Nancy Pelosi California liberal. That's his record. If you like what we have in Texas, I think we're doing a lot right in Texas. If you like low taxes, low regulations, small businesses growing lots of jobs, if you want the border secure so our families are safe, if you're pissed off that Venezuelan gangs are taking over apartment buildings in San Antonio, then I would say you should vote for the common sense policies that work in Texas. That's what this is about, is keeping Texas, Texas. If Colin Allred is elected, we will see the policies that have destroyed states like California brought here. I don't think Texans want that.
Senator, I appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for making time for us.
Absolutely.